love and devotion.
You believe an 11-year-old boy could enter music with a hit, become the hope of an entire family, and then more than half a century later be remembered through a heartbreaking piece of news. Foster Sylvers, the golden boy behind Misdemeanor, and a member of the musical family once placed alongside names like the Jacksons, has died at the age of 64. From a child singer who once made R&B audiences turn their heads, he came to his final days in end-of-life care, far from the stage and the applause that had once surrounded him. What makes this story even more haunting is that even the illness that took his life has not been reported consistently by public sources. Some say Foster battled pancreatic cancer. Others mention metastatic prostate cancer. That detail does not turn his death into a medical mystery, but it does reveal something sadder. An artist once heard across America ultimately appeared again through scattered fragments of information. This is not just the story of a child star passing away. This is the story of a boy placed under the lights too soon, who then grew up in the shadow of that very brightness. What turned a child prodigy of R&B into a man forced to live between memory silence and the difficult chapters of his life? The answer begins at a time when Foster was not yet a name in a sad headline, but a boy holding a microphone standing between music family and a version of the American dream that once promised talent could carry black children out of the darkness. 1. The child in the house where the music never stopped. Foster was born on February 25, 1962, in Memphis, Tennessee, a place where soul, gospel, and blues seemed almost woven into the air. Foster was not born into an ordinary family, and then happened to stumble into music. He was born into the Sylvers family, a family where music was not just a hobby, but an identity. The Sylvers were not a group assembled by a record label to look good on stage. They were real brothers and sisters raised together, singing together, rehearsing together, and then stepping into the machinery of professional performance, as if the entire family had been prepared for the stage from the beginning. It sounds beautiful. A large family, a house full of harmonies, gifted children, voices blending together as naturally as breathing. But if you look closer, that beauty had its own very specific darkness. Because in a family like that, music was not only joy, it quickly became discipline, expectation, responsibility, and sometimes the very thing that took away the normality of childhood. While many children Foster's age were still going to school, watching television, playing sports, or messing around in the street, Foster was already living in a different world. In that world, a free afternoon could turn into hours of harmony practice. A small mistake in rhythm was not just a child's mistake, but something that had to be fixed immediately, because one day it could happen in front of a real audience, under real lights, on a real stage. That is what makes Foster Sylvers' story both dazzling and chilling. He did not just learn how to sing, he learned how to become part of a family machine. In a family act, each child is not simply a son, a brother, a sister. Each child is also a link in the chain, a harmony part, a position on stage, a piece of the overall image. When an entire family becomes a brand, childhood also begins to turn into performance. You do not just grow up learning who you are. You grow up learning where you stand in the lineup, which part you sing when you step forward, how you smile, and how not to break the perfection of the group. For Foster, that came very early. He did not enter music through a side door. He was almost placed right at the center of it. From the living room to the recording studio, from family rehearsals to professional meetings, Foster watched how music was made before many other children could even understand how a song was recorded. He heard harmony not just as a listener, but as someone being trained to become part of that harmony. In other words, Foster Sylvers was given an enormous gift. He was born into a family with music running through its blood. But that gift came with a price, because when talent appears too early, in a child, adults often see opportunity before they see fragility. A special voice is no longer only a source of family pride. It becomes potential. It becomes hope. It becomes a promise to the stage, to the record label, to the audience, and sometimes to the future of an entire family. The most frightening question is no longer, how well can this boy sing? It becomes, how far can this boy go before his own childhood is left behind? That is the dark side, often hidden beneath the glittering costumes of family groups. On television, audiences saw smiles, choreography, siblings singing perfect harmonies, and the warm image of a family conquering music together. But behind it, few people knew how quickly each child had to grow up. Few asked whether a boy like Foster truly understood what he was walking into, or whether he was simply being swept along by the powerful current of talent, family, and expectation. And it was right here that Foster's quiet tragedy began to take shape. Not with a loud fall, not with a scandal, not with illness, but with a very small shift from a child with a beautiful voice. He gradually became a musical asset that adults believed had to be brought into the spotlight as early as possible. 2. Misdemeanor. The hit and the first shadow. There are moments in an artist's life that are like a door opening very quickly. So quickly that the person walking through it has not yet had time to understand whether the other side is glory or a trap wrapped in lights. For Foster Sylvers, that door opened in 1973. At the time, Foster was only about 11 years old. At an age when many children were still worrying about homework, playgrounds, and afternoons spent running around outside, Foster had already stepped into the recording studio as a solo artist. His debut album bearing his own name, Foster Sylvers, was released. And from that album, one song flared up like the first spark, Misdemeanor. Even the title sounded unusual. Misdemeanor. A small offense, a wrongdoing that is not too serious, a kind of trouble, just interesting enough to make people curious. But what made the song special was not only its title. It was the voice coming from inside that record, the voice of a boy, yet carrying a confidence that was very hard to explain. Not the innocent confidence of a child who has been praised too much by adults. Not the kind of cuteness constructed to sell an image. Foster sang as if he understood the stage, understood rhythm, understood how a line needed to land in exactly the right place to make listeners shrug, nod their heads, and then somehow remember it for a very long time. Misdemeanor was written by his brother Leon Sylvers III. And that matters, because it shows that Foster was not walking alone. Behind his voice was an entire family operating like a living music workshop. One brother wrote, the younger one sang, other members blended into the wider picture. The Sylvers did not just make music. They created a family ecosystem where each person's talent was placed in the right position so the machine could run more smoothly. But inside that machine, Foster suddenly became the clearest point of light. The song Misdemeanor quickly drew attention. According to compiled chart data, the track reached number 7 on Billboard R&B and number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100. For an adult artist, that would already have been a dream achievement. For an 11-year-old boy, it was almost a direct launch into a zone of light that very few children are prepared to enter. And this is exactly where the story begins to become dangerous. Because Misdemeanor does not sound like a simple children's song. It has groove, it has funk, it has a bass line that makes the body want to move. It has mischief but not shallowness. It has youthful charm, but it is placed on a very adult musical foundation. Foster did not sing like a little boy asking the audience to love him. He sang like an artist stepping out to claim attention. Listeners did not just see a cute child. They saw a real artist, and that is what made Misdemeanor both captivating and strange. a boy just over 10 years old singing about love devotion emotions going astray and having to get through some kind of confusion. Lines about love and devotion lost feelings, and everything eventually settling down. If placed in the voice of an adult, they might simply have been a catchy soul funk song. But when placed in Foster's voice, they created a different effect. That boy was singing emotions bigger than his age, and audiences were drawn into that very mismatch. On one side, they saw childhood. On the other, they heard something that seemed to have already moved beyond childhood. Foster was both young and strangely mature, both adorable and hard to predict, both like a child in a musical family and like a star the stage had chosen in advance. But stop for a moment and ask, when a child is praised for sounding older than his years, is that really a compliment? Or is it a warning sign? At 11, Foster already had a hit. He already had a name on the charts. He already had audiences' radio-television expectations. A successful song does not only bring joy, it also places a new question on the singer's shoulders: what comes next? For adults, that question is already heavy enough. For a child, it is much heavier, because children are supposed to be allowed to try and fail, to be clumsy, to grow up through unfinished versions of themselves. But once you become a phenomenon, every mistake can be seen through different eyes. You are no longer just a boy learning how to sing. You are Foster Sylvers, the boy who already had a hit. Early fame is like a beautiful coat that is too heavy. From the outside, it sparkles. Everyone thinks the person wearing it is lucky. But inside, the child may be being pulled down by the very light that other people admire. And what hurts even more is that the public often loves a moment more than a human being. They loved the Foster of Misdemeanor, young, confident, fresh, full of life. They loved the feeling of discovering a child talent who could make a stage come alive. But time does not stand still. That boy would grow up. His voice would change, his face would change, the music would change, the market would change. So when Foster was no longer the boy of 1973, would audiences still want to listen to him? That is the quiet question that follows so many child stars. People applaud when they are too good for their age. But when they grow up, the very image that made them famous becomes the shadow cast over them. The public wants them to grow up, but not change too much. Wants them to be new, but still preserve the original feeling. Wants them to become adult artists, but still remembers them as the child who once amazed them. For Foster, Misdemeanor was his first victory. It proved that he was not just the youngest child in a musical family. He could stand alone. He could have his own name. He could leave his own mark. But at the same time, that hit also built a frame that Foster would later find very hard to step out of. Because after a real hit, no one looks at you the same way again. Your family looks at you differently. The record label looks at you differently. The audience looks at you differently. And perhaps you begin to look at yourself differently too. An ordinary child can ask, "Who do I want to become?" But a famous child is often asked, "What will you do next?" That is the hidden tragedy behind the playful bass line of Misdemeanor. The song made people dance, made people smile, made Foster one of the memorable young faces of early 1970s R&B. But behind that funk rhythm was a truth that wasn't light at all. Foster's childhood had begun to be measured by achievement. And when childhood is measured by chart positions, it is no longer fully childhood. From this point on, Foster was no longer just a boy in the Sylvers family. He had become a name, a voice, an expectation, a promise that this family could go further, shine brighter, grow bigger. Foster had what thousands of adult artists dream of: a real hit. But what no one told that boy was this: having a hit too early does not always open the door to freedom. Sometimes it creates a shadow you spend your whole life trying to step out of. 3. Boogie Fever. The family dream under the lights. After the explosion called Misdemeanor, Foster Sylvers had something many grown artists dream of for a lifetime and never touch a hit under his own name. But Foster's story did not stop with the image of a little solo boy standing in front of a microphone. Because behind him, there was still a family, a lineup, a name waiting for the moment to burst into flame: the Sylvers. If Misdemeanor was the moment Foster stepped into the light alone, then the Sylvers were when that light multiplied into an entire family stage. It was no longer just a boy singing with strange confidence. Now audiences saw a lineup of real brothers and sisters singing together, dancing together, wearing bright costumes together, appearing as a complete picture of 1970s R&B, soul, funk, and disco. Imagine American television screens at that time. Hot lights, glossy stages, big afros, matching outfits that caught every beam, a thick bass line that seemed to pull the whole room forward. Dance steps so precise that audiences felt every member of this family did not just hear the music, but breathed in the same rhythm. The Sylvers did not simply perform, they created a feeling. The feeling that family could be music, the feeling that youth could be energy, the feeling that with the right song at the right time, all of America could stand up and move. After Foster's solo success, the group entered a dazzling period with songs such as Fool's Paradise, Boogie Fever, Hotline, and High School Dance. But of all of them, Boogie Fever was the brightest flare. In May 1976, the song climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the Sylvers' defining hit, the song whose title alone is enough to pull listeners back to an era when disco was not just music, but a cultural fever. And that title says everything: Boogie Fever. Not boogie mood, not boogie night, but fever, a fever. Something that spreads through the body and makes people unable to sit still. The song did not need anyone's permission to enter living rooms, radios, dance floors, and television shows. It went straight into the listener, through rhythm, through joy, through an energy that almost needed no explanation. The Sylvers appeared at exactly the moment America was hungry for sounds like that. After social upheaval, after political tension, after heavy years, the public wanted to dance, wanted to forget, wanted to dress well, wanted to see young, radiant faces blending together like a promise that life could still shine under disco lights. And the Sylvers gave them exactly that. But the group did not just sell music. They sold an image, a talented black family, a dazzling lineup, a kind of organized joy, a dream sung in many voices, danced through many pairs of feet, wrapped in melodies catchy enough that radio could not ignore them. Before them, the Jackson 5 had opened a huge door for black family acts in American popular culture. Audiences were already familiar with the image of siblings going on stage together, making music together, and representing the dream of talent born inside one home, before stepping out into the world. The Sylvers did not walk the exact same path, but they entered the same emotional space. Audiences loved the feeling that talent could be born under one roof, raised in family rehearsals, and one day explode in front of millions. For Foster, this was a new chapter. He was no longer only the boy from Misdemeanor. He became part of a bigger image, the Sylvers, as a symbol of the era. In that lineup, Foster brought youthful energy, freshness, and the stage charm that had been recognized so early. If the whole group was a family music machine, Foster was one of the gears that gave that machine its special life. But what is the rule of light? The brighter it shines, the longer and darker the shadow it casts behind it. The higher their story rose, the larger the quiet tragedy became. Because a family band that looks beautiful on stage does not mean everything behind the scenes is easy. Audiences saw the smiles, but not the schedule. They saw the polished choreography, but not the repeated hours of practice that wore the body down. They heard smooth harmonies, but did not know how much pressure it took for every voice to land in the right place every step to fit the formation, and every appearance to preserve the perfect family image. With family groups, the pressure has an even more complicated layer. If you are tired, it is not just a personal matter. If you sing the wrong note, it is not just one artist's mistake. If you want to stop it, could affect the whole group, the whole family, an entire brand being built out of blood ties. Family and work are tied together by knots that are very hard to untangle. When the stage lights come on, everyone has to smile. When the music starts, everyone has to dance. When the audience applauds, no one wants to know whether someone backstage is exhausted. And do not forget, inside that family there were children still growing up. Foster had entered this machine very early, at an age when someone should still be trying to understand what they liked, what they feared, who they wanted to become. Foster already had to understand lights, microphones, audiences, television charts, and expectations. The success of the Sylvers lifted him higher, but it also made the shadow larger. If Misdemeanor created pressure for Foster as a solo artist, then Boogie Fever placed him inside the pressure of a family symbol. The more famous they became, the more they had to protect the image. The more hits they had, the more they needed the next hit. The more they were loved for being a perfect family, the less they were allowed to reveal that this family also had exhaustion, tension, fear, and cracks, like any other family. That is the small tragedy sitting beneath a joyful song. Boogie Fever made people dance, but it also locked the Sylvers into one very specific moment in popular culture. When you become the sound of a fever, you also have to accept one dangerous truth: every fever eventually breaks. Boogie Fever took the Sylvers to the top. But ironically, every fever eventually cools. And when disco began to lose heat, the people who had once lived on that light had to learn how to survive in the dark. 4. When the fever broke. There is a very strange moment in the career of artists who once stood at the peak of a trend. The stage lights are still on, the music is still playing, audiences are still applauding somewhere. But the color of the era has already begun to change. For the Sylvers, that moment came as the 1970s slowly drew to a close. Before that, they had once had everything a family group could dream of. Hits television choreography, a dazzling image, songs that made people want to get out of their seats. Boogie Fever had once taken them to the top, turning the whole family into a symbol of a colorful disco era. But popular music is not a house where an artist can live forever. It is more like a train that keeps moving, and if you do not switch cars in time, you are left behind on the platform of your own old glory. From the late 1970s into the early 1980s, disco began to lose its pull. The very thing that had once sent America into a fever was suddenly viewed differently. The dance floors were still there, but radio had begun searching for new sounds. R&B shifted direction. Funk changed shape. Pop became colder, glossier. Hip-hop began rising from the streets, bringing with it a completely different rhythm, language, and attitude. In a market like that, groups that once represented an era can very easily be turned into memories of that very era. The Sylvers continued working. They did not vanish overnight. Foster was not an artist who had run out of talent and was then forgotten. To be fair, he still had music in his blood, still played bass, still worked in the studio, still supported other artists such as Dynasty and Evelyn Champagne King, and continued pursuing some solo and collaborative projects. But the problem was not whether Foster still had ability. The problem was that the world around him had changed rhythm. And when the world changes rhythm, the person who once made the whole room move suddenly has to ask himself, where do I belong now? The move from the center of the stage to behind the curtain is a very quiet fall. It is not as noisy as a scandal. There is no clear collapse for the press to frame. No single fall for audiences to point at and say, this is when everything ended. It is more drawn out than that. Fewer calls today than yesterday. This appearance is smaller than the last. The new song is no longer pushed as hard as before. A name that once shone on posters gradually becomes a footnote in listeners' memories, before audiences remembered Foster's face. Foster's voice. They remembered the boy from Misdemeanor, the young member of the Sylvers, the fresh energy of a family that had once lit up the 1970s. Later, they might still replay the old grooves, still catch a sample somewhere, still move their shoulders when Boogie Fever came on. But they no longer asked where Foster was, what he was doing, or how he was living. That is the most painful kind of forgetting, not being erased completely, but being kept inside a version of yourself that is far too old. Foster remained close to music, but the distance between being close to music and being seen by the world is a very long distance. A person can still create, still play, still have skill, but if the light no longer shines on them, the public will assume they have disappeared. The music industry can be cruel like that. It does not always ask whether you still love the craft. It asks whether you can still sell a new moment. And for artists who became famous when they were very young, that question is even harsher. Because they are not only competing with new faces, they are also competing with their own childhood image. Foster grew up, but the public still remembered the boy of 1973. The Sylvers grew up, but the public still wanted the disco fever of 1976. Time moves forward, but public memory likes to stand still. So what was someone like Foster supposed to do? Keep chasing the old spotlight, or accept standing behind the stage where fewer people called his name, but at least the music was still there? Perhaps he chose the second way. Quieter, more modest, less legendary, but also more real. Foster was no longer the boy the whole market pushed to the front. He became a working musician, an instrumentalist, an artist trying to find a place in an era no longer centered on the sound that had made his name. But when the professional lights begin to dim, a person often has to face the dark spaces that applause once covered up. And for Foster Sylvers behind the stage, there was not only the silence of a career in decline. That was where the harder, more difficult parts of his life began to appear. 5. Memories that no longer fit together. A person's life is never as neat as a nostalgic playlist. When the stage lights finally moved away, Foster Sylvers' life began to turn down rougher, more hidden roads, where the media no longer pursued him with praise, but with the curiosity reserved for a former star who had fallen from grace. Alongside the silence around his career, Foster's private life also contained a serious legal chapter. Some media sources, including Page 6, previously reported that Foster had a 1994 conviction related to a sex crime, and that his names appeared in California's sex offender database. This is the kind of information that cannot be handled with cheap sensationalism, and should never be turned into a tool for mocking a man who has died. But if Foster's life is to be told fully, it also cannot be treated as if it never existed. Because that serious legal chapter meant Foster's public image was no longer tied only to music. And this is where the story needs to be told with more maturity. Foster Sylvers should not be framed as a flawless childhood angel simply because audiences loved Misdemeanor. But he should not be reduced to a single line of scandal either, as if his entire life, talent, family, music, and contributions could be erased by one final label. Real human beings are often more complicated than nostalgic memory. And sometimes it is that very complexity that makes them difficult to face. This complexity accidentally created a tragedy of public memory. It rarely remembers a person in full. It keeps only the easiest pieces to consume. Each group of the public holds one piece, then assumes it has understood the whole picture of him. Some people only knew Foster through Boogie Fever. Some only found him again in old funk and soul playlists. Some heard Misdemeanor through a sample without knowing how many ups and downs the boy behind that song had gone through. Some did not read his name for the first time until he died. This fragmentation stretched across decades of silence. By the end of his life, Foster had completely disappeared from the flow of mainstream media. He lived a life almost separate from it, leaving his music to survive on its own in the digital world, like a voice coming from the room next door, familiar yet distant, before the darkness of illness came down cruelly. 6. The quiet final days. On May 30th, 2026, Foster Sylvers died at the age of 64. The news did not arrive with the noise of the stages that had once called his name. No big lights, no final performance, no bass line opening a familiar funk track. Just a sad line of news confirmed by his family, then quickly spreading through the community of those who loved 1970s R&B, soul funk, and disco. For many people, the name Foster Sylvers may not have appeared in the headlines for a long time. But all it takes is a mention of Misdemeanor, of the Sylvers of the era, when family groups lit up American television, and the memories come rushing back. He had once been a boy whose voice made adults turn their heads. A young face standing at the intersection of music, family, and disco fever. Part of an era when just hearing the music was enough to make audiences want to get up and move. But this time, Foster returned to public memory for a far more painful reason. He had died after battling cancer. According to sources citing TMZ, his brother Leon Sylvers III confirmed that Foster Sylvers died after a battle with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and passed away in hospice care. However, some other reports circulated from Urweb stated that he had metastatic prostate cancer. So when telling the story of Foster's final days, the most necessary thing is caution. Early reports have not been fully consistent about the type of cancer, but the shared point does not change. Foster went through a severe stage of illness. The cancer progressed, and his life eventually came to a close in end-of-life care. The word hospice makes the story grow heavy, because hospice is not a place of glamour. It is usually the stage when the goal of care shifts from cure to easing pain, supporting the spirit, preserving the patient's dignity, and making sure they do not have to go through their final days alone. In other words, it is when a life that was once so public and so noisy returns to the most private things: family health, a weakening body, and the preparation for goodbye. There are not many public details about Foster's final hours. His family did not speak at length. The press had only a few lines of confirmation. And perhaps that very scarcity makes the story even sadder. A man whose voice once came through the radio, who had a place in the musical memory of an entire generation, ultimately left almost in silence. After the news of his death was announced, many fans began looking back at Foster Sylvers' journey. They remembered the boy in Misdemeanor. They remembered the Sylvers and the bright disco years. They remembered a family that once stepped onto the stage with youthful energy, matching outfits, catchy melodies, and that unmistakable joy of the 1970s. But the sorrow for Foster did not come only from nostalgia. It also came from a sense of regret, because an artist who became famous so early, who was loved by audiences while he was still a child, spent his final years with far less public attention than before. When he was singing, the world applauded. When he was ill, everything was much quieter. That is the painful paradox of fame. The spotlight can turn a child into a phenomenon, but it cannot protect that person from illness. Hit songs can live on for decades, but the human body cannot. A song can be replayed, sampled, added to playlists, and discovered by new audiences, but the person who sang it still has to face aging, illness, and death like anyone else. So the shocking truth behind Foster Sylvers' death should not be understood as some dark secret or hidden conspiracy. That truth is simpler, but also more brutal. A child star who once shone brightly had to go through his final illness in silence. And when he died, the world suddenly remembered that behind joyful songs, there is always a real human being with a real life, a real body and pains that no melody can sing away. Foster Sylvers died at 64, leaving behind not only songs, but also a silence. That silence forces people to look again. We often love artists when they make us happy, but do we still remember them when the stage has gone dark, when illness begins, when a once familiar name appears only in a sad headline? And that is what makes Foster Sylvers' death so haunting. He did not leave in the middle of some loud Hollywood mystery. He left inside a much quieter truth. Fame may belong to the crowd, but the final days of a human being are always deeply private. 7. The final legacy. After everything, how should Foster Sylvers be remembered? Perhaps not as a perfect icon, and not as a name trapped inside the difficult chapters of his life either. He should be remembered as a complicated human being, someone who shone very early, who added his voice to a vibrant era of music, and then slowly stepped away from the spotlight in a way far quieter than many people imagine. Foster's legacy lies in the feeling his music leaves behind. A little innocence, a little groove, a little regret. It is the thing that makes people listen to an old song again and suddenly remember that behind every melody that once made them happy, there was always a real human life, with glory, with mistakes, with loss, with final days that no longer came with applause. And perhaps the question that remains is not only for Foster, but for all of us. Do we only remember artists when they can still make us move? Or are we still decent enough to remember them when the stage lights have gone dark? If you ever knew Foster Sylvers, leave a comment for him. Not to turn a death into drama, but to remind us that the voices that once shaped our memories deserve to be remembered by more than a sad headline.
Some opinions expressed in this video may be subjective and reflect the content creator's perspective at the time of production. They should not be interpreted as objective facts or official positions. Legends never truly die, as long as we remember them. If you want to help us keep these stories alive, please subscribe to Silent Legends. What is your fondest memory of this icon? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Click this video right here on your screen. It's a journey you don't want to miss. Until next time.